Do you do commissions? Because, if people hear, oh, you're a visual artist, can you do a portrait of, my cat? As in...
Depends how much you're paying.
So you would accept a commission to paint a cat?
If the money is right, why not?
The world has gone bonkers. We now live in George Orwell's 1984. War is peace, ignorance is strength, and crazy is normal. How do you stay sane? Cris Mora is a visual artist who has worked in the different aspects of the art world, including collections management. Francis Commeyne is a visual artist with an extraordinary love of mayonnaise. Okay, so did you always want to be visual artists? As in, do you recall a moment when you decided this is what you wanted to do for the rest of your lives?
I don't think I always wanted to be. I always drew. I always kind of played with art materials when I was a kid, but I think when I entered high school, it never really occurred to me that art could be a viable career option. I grew up in Canada, and so there was this channel called A&E, Arts and Entertainment Television, and so they had a show called Biography, where they would just, it's like an hour show where they cover the life of someone. And I turned it on, and this particular week, it happened to be Art Week.
Okay.
So every day, the biography was Monet or Van Gogh or Picasso, something like that.
And you had this idea.
Yeah, well, it was the first time that I had kind of seen or looked closely at art again in a few years. So, and it really kind of piqued my interest again. And then I thought to myself, well, I could do that. I could be as good as those guys.
Are you part Canadian? You're Filipino?
Yeah, well, it's a mixed bag.
And Francis, you are part Belgian?
My father's Belgian, my mother's Filipino.
You grew up in Manila?
No, that's a completely different case.
Oh.
I was born in Sri Lanka.
Okay.
And then moved to Ecuador, Guatemala, Zimbabwe, and then the Philippines. So
what made you decide to go into art?
Like Cris, I've been doing it ever since, I guess, in middle school, high school. And by the end of high school, I needed to choose something. So I said, why not? I'll give it a try. And so I've been doing it ever since.
And do you both regret being based here? But before you answer that, can I offer you a drink?
To answer this.
Yes, please. Gamba, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so now you're in Manila, you're doing art, and do you have any regrets about being based here? As in, do you ever think, I want to be in Canada instead? And do you ever think, I want to go back to Sri Lanka, Ecuador?
Sometimes yes, but basically I'm here because my mom wanted us to kind of regain our roots. So at least half of our roots. So now that I've been here for maybe 13 years, something like that, I think it's maybe time for me to also explore my Belgian side.
And what about you, Cris?
Yeah, I've only been here for about six years, and prior to this, I was living in London and Singapore.
And you were working in the art industry.
So in Singapore, I worked for an institution called STPI, and then in London, I worked for an art logistics company. So it's like FedEx, but for artwork.
For art, which would be a good place to plan an art heist.
London or
transit.
Yeah,
Anyway.
London or Switzerland, that's where you would do
Yes.
it. But yeah, I think coming back here was kind of or connect maybe for the first time with something that I had been separated from since I grew up in Canada. I think there's kind of an experience of being Filipino that's different than being Filipino-Canadian in Canada.
Do you think that the culture shock of adjusting to Filipino life has helped in your art practice?
The art that I'm making is kind of about my experience here and the grind of being here, because I feel like, just to answer your question earlier, that I think it is a grind to be here. There are like really beautiful aspects about this place, but there are also very difficult things to navigate.
For instance, the literal navigation, as in because of the traffic, you can only do one thing every day.
Exactly.
Maybe two. One in the morning, one in the afternoon.
Yes, but with real planning, Yeah.
There's also, I think, with Manila, there's a real geography issue. Like, where you live really affects how you experience this place. Someone who lives and exists in Makati versus someone who lives in
Yes, for instance,
Fairview.
my optometrist is in Quezon City, and I consider that a cross-country journey from Makati, where I am.
North of the wall, as they
Yes,
say.
exactly.
I think getting into Hong Kong is faster than going to QC sometimes. right?
Exactly. So when I heard that U2, which I used to love in the 90s, was performing here, I said, yay, I'm going to buy U2 tickets. And they said, it's in Bulacan. I think the travel time to Singapore would be faster and the tickets would cost the same. Yeah, so
Or maybe even cheaper.
exactly, because concerts here are really expensive. But anyway, I interrupted you.
Well, as for me, I guess being here, like Chris, has influenced my work. My work is basically, I guess, Filipino-based, based around Filipino culture, the daily grind as well.
Yeah, I remember recent exhibits of yours, as in your work had to do with Abarong Tagalog, and
Yes.
your work talked about current events,
Current events, a lot of,
dead bodies.
that's him.
Oh, that's nice.
That's definitely him. Mine, I guess, would be more of like your everyday objects, your everyday scenes, your everyday life. A lot more of like the mundane things that go unnoticed. But me being, I guess, somewhat of a semi-outsider looking in, I see things in a different light based on my mixed cultural background. So I think that helps in pointing out these things and bringing them to light.
I think that's something common to the both of us. We are kind of like 1 foot in, 1 foot out in
Yeah.
terms of our perspective, our acceptance here, our experience.
Right.
Well, actually, in this day and age, maybe not that unique.
It's not, yeah, it's changing.
There are so
Definitely
many.
changing.
The Filipino culture is now diasporic.
Yes.
And so I think that's something that I'd like to examine more or talk about more is like, what does it mean to be Filipino here versus Filipino there? Or what does this blending or mixing or crossing of cultures mean for this Filipino identity?
Well, you were talking about the Filipino experience, and I can tell you that part of the Filipino experience for people who want to go into the arts is their parents telling them, "Oy, get a proper career because there's no money in arts."
But I don't think that's just a Filipino thing, to be fair. I think that's like a worldview.
Okay.
Where parents will always kind of stop you from getting into the arts. I mean, we all know it's a tough career,
Yeah.
you know? It has its ups, it has its
Yeah, I
downs.
guess parents'
It's
jobs
not a consistent
are
thing.
to make sure that we can, buy food,
Yeah.
clothing.
But I think the idea that there's no money in art is kind of a mythology because I mean, we've all heard of stratospheric prices being paid for paintings.
Exactly.
And the global industry for art is in the region of like 50 to 60 billion dollars.
Right.
I think the problem is really its size, right? Like it's just that not many people get to participate. Especially if you want to be an artist. I always liken it to being a professional athlete. Lots of people make art, but not many achieve that kind of like, I don't know, Damien Hirst level of success, financial success.
Yes.
I mean, it's not smooth either across the globe. I mean, what is happening here in the Philippines compared to what's happening in an art center like London or New York are almost worlds apart. Partly, I like to think that we're participating in bringing this kind of cultural production here and sharing it with the world. And hopefully the Philippines can one day achieve that level of recognition and integration with the larger art world.
I also think we can't just deny the fact that it's harder in developing countries,
Right.
where I guess the art and culture isn't seen as a priority as maybe in the first world.
Yeah,
right?
which makes parents' concern far more urgent because here, as in, starvation is real.
Certainly,
Exactly.
yeah, I don't think that can be discounted at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you did mention money and the fact that the Philippines is supposed to be in the middle of an art boom. What do you think? As in, we keep hearing about how much was paid for this piece or that piece at auction, as in lots and lots of zeros. But do you think this is real? As in, do most artists feel it? Or is it mostly dead artists?
I think there's definitely a boom, for sure. I mean, you see it in the number of shows that open on a weekly basis, the number of galleries that have been popping up. I think the difference is like, how will this translate to other things, the infrastructure of other, bigger museums, bigger institutions that will actually help fund the art. You have all these art being made in galleries, which is still kind of a small scale as opposed to something that will be throughout the country, I feel. There is a boom, but at the same time, not really.
It's confined to a small group.
Exactly, it's confined to like a private entity, if you will.
Well, I think it goes to the kind of structure of the art ecosystem here. Here, it's a very market-driven
Right.
community because, I mean, there's no support for other kinds of institutions. Like you have a national museum, you have a handful of private museums, and then you have a ton of commercial
Private
galleries.
Right.
And then artist spaces, they exist, but
They come
again,
and go.
yeah, I mean, it's hard to make it survive in this environment. So the work and the artists that can really succeed are the ones who can thrive in that commercial environment.
And I noticed that in this art boom we're in, regular people are now talking about art. I mean, civilians, people who are not in the art world, but mostly they talk about the huge sums paid in auctions rather than the quality of the work itself. As in, we haven't gotten to the point where we're talking about the work. How do you think that can change?
Well, it's like, I think still majority of the people and their interest in art is seen like through selfies, especially in the art fair, stuff like that. I don't know if many of them actually know of even the auctions. It's only a select few of artists, the really top ones, who are actually involved in this. Like for us who are, I guess, struggling artists, it doesn't really affect us yet, I guess, because we're not in it.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Our works are not being auctioned off.
oh yeah, that's a different world.
But then there's something like the art fair, which is always packed. As in, I don't know if there's any sort of art appreciation in regular schools. As in, of course, in art school you have to learn it.
It's limited compared, like for example, me coming from an international school background, we always had an art class throughout every year basically. And while here in local schools, I guess it's not really implemented.
No, we have
continuously.
art class in school, but what we do is they give us colored paper and glue and we make things, and then in
So
high
it's more
school
of
it's
like
all
arts and
forgotten.
crafts, I guess.
Although in high school we did have 1 year of art appreciation in which we read Learning to Look and that's it.
Well, I don't know, maybe it goes to a deeper question of what do we value art for? And that's a tough thing to answer. Like, I mean, I have no idea. I've been thinking about it for a long time. But like, what does it mean for people to look and experience art in the context that we live in, right?
Yes.
What is the value of a painting, like we said, when people are starving?
So we're stuck at the economics of it rather than we haven't gotten past the.
Yeah, but I guess if you want, before any of these conversations can start, it needs to be introduced into schools. Then, like you said, if it's still limited, that's where you start. You start at the beginning on how to appreciate art as children.
Yeah,
and
it will
then
probably
it carries
be
on.
at most an elective.
Yeah, exactly.
Or maybe just public access, like being able to go to a museum. Anybody could go. I think that's a start. Like when I lived in London, when I first moved there, I didn't realize that all of the museums were free.
Yeah.
Free. I mean, so I would be like waiting for a bus or a meeting, and I knew I'd had like 15 minutes. I'll just pop into the Tate,
Yes.
and just walk around, look around, and I know the national museums are now free, which I think is a really great initiative.
Yeah, they're free, but if you live in Quezon City, for
Yeah,
instance,
that's-
and
yeah.
not in Manila, that's
what I was gonna say, but
your transportation is expensive.
yeah, and your time and everything. But that's a whole nother issue,
Yeah.
right? But I think the ability to just see art is kind of the first step.
And did you guys have to have formal training, or are you self-taught, or
I had we both had formal training.
did, yeah.
do you think it's essential?
It helps, of course it helps, but I don't think it's the end all or no.
No, I think what's interesting too is that the type of training that we received was completely different. Well, in Canada, it was very like conceptually driven in the sense that like they don't teach you to draw. They don't
Techniques
teach you,
and-
they don't teach you technique really. Yeah, it was just really about the quality of your thought as you created the object. It wasn't necessarily about the object itself.
Aha, and in your case?
Pretty much the same in UP. I came from UP, and that was kind of the mindset as well. The focus was more on your content, your conceptualization of your work, as opposed to techniques, which I've heard is kind of the focus in USC. That's always been like the two camps.
But you guys still
And-
have like painting class.
Yeah, of
like, where
course,
you
we still
see-
have, yeah.
like we didn't
But-
even have that.
I think towards the end it has kind of changed where I'm a painting major, but for instance, for our thesis, many of the painting majors didn't even do painting. So it was more on really going out of the box and creating a work that wasn't driven by technique or anything like that.
But I think
so
anybody can be an artist. You know, like, this is gonna be a really stupid reference, but like, have you seen Ratatouille?
Yes.
Yeah, like I love that.
So a rat can cook.
Yeah, that any
a rat
you
can
know?
paint then, is that?
No, an artist can come from anywhere, and as silly as that is, I think it's true. You know.
Yeah.
But it's just that you have certain advantages if you take formal training, just in terms
Yeah,
of like
it's
network
like a
and things
shortcut. So instead of thinking, how am I going to make this, you already have some idea of the process.
Yeah, right, and you understand the context a bit more, right?
Yeah.
Like the historical context.
But I think it's more on that. It's very reflective of the now. The contemporary art scene is not really driven anymore by technique or how well you can paint, how well you can depict realistic whatever scenery, portraits, all that. We're way beyond that now. So that's why I think like you don't actually need to know how to realistically paint something or
But I actually find that people who are not formally trained are better at that than the people
Than the ones who
are
actually
formally
trained.
I guess
Like-
if you've had some sort of formal training, you're thinking, no, this is not done. I have to make it more formal, etc.
But who's to say? Like it's so subjective, right? I mean, nowadays you don't just because one thing doesn't look realistic doesn't mean it's incorrect or it's done wrong.
Yes,
you know?
and this is why a lot of people go into a gallery and then they see conceptual art and they say,
What
is
the hell
that
is
art?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or I can do that too. It's like, I can do that too, ergo it's not art.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
there's
yeah.
also this saying, I can do that too, but I
Or
didn't.
my 5-year-old can do it.
Yeah,
Or,
and that's contemporary art. Like I can do it too, but I didn't.
so this is like the rhyme that my friend and I recite every time we go to an art fair. Kaya ko rin yan, ba't di mo ginawa? Kaya ko rin yan, ba't di mo
Exactly.
ginawa? Yeah, so how do you personally deal with aggravation, with anxiety, stress? Do you think that being a visual artist makes it easier for you because you always have a channel?
I sort of think that every artist draws from one kind of emotion or driver that produces their work. I think for me, that driver is really like anger. Like when something really upsets me about the world or about my life, that's how I express it. Like my happiness, I want to keep to myself. I don't need to share that with anybody.
I can tell you that happiness is counterproductive in my case. As in, when I'm happy, there's really no need to write. I'm already happy.
Yeah.
I drink. That's how I deal with my aggravation, I guess. No, but yeah, art will always be an outlet in whatever concern you have, whatever thing that's bothering you. I think as a visual artist, we have that outlet, so it is an advantage. But then again, writers have the same thing. Actors probably do the same
Yeah,
thing.
but I don't think
and
everybody is the same in
No,
that.
of course not.
Right? So I think
So we have different ways to
we have
deal.
different
I
ways
guess.
to deal with
Yeah.
it. I think it's a cliche though to say that we paint or we do things out because it's our emotion and just to get it out. Yes and no. It's just that romantic notion of this emotional, angry, emo artist.
Yeah, and I think personally that a lot of anxiety comes from being aware of what's happening in the outside world, listening to the news, getting getting news alerts, etc. Do you keep up with current events, political events, or
I try and be as aware as possible.
does it go into your work, you think?
I think explicitly, my work is kind of explicitly about current events, especially now. This is the only platform I have, you know, and so I think that's my chance to say something, and so I might as well say something worth saying.
Do you
Yeah.
find it's true in your case?
It is true, but if I compare my work, let's say to Chris's work is very in your face, very political in your face, while I guess mine, it is political, but very subtle. So I have subtle jabs here and there, but I think maybe a bit more diplomatic approach, I guess.
I think yeah, it's more of like the politics of the everyday.
Politics
and I
of
think,
everyday, yeah.
Mine is more about like the politics of nation and state.
Do you find that your work is influenced by the other arts? As in, do you listen to music or watch movies?
Since I'm a visual guy, I think movies is really my inspiration. Music and movies, as opposed to, I guess, reading in your case.
Yeah, for me, I read a lot. I read a lot of fiction, a lot of nonfiction. A lot of the nonfiction I read is kind of really where I draw a lot of the content from. But in terms of like inspiration from outside sources, in terms of the form, I'm really interested in like other artists' creative process, like not just in the visual arts, but like how does a musician come to compose something, and can that process lead us to a new type of art making? I think that is really interesting to me.
So, could you describe your process? Like, what stages does a work go through from the time that you think about it to the time that it actually is finished?
I think for me, the thinking about it phase is really long.
Yeah.
And the actual making of it phase is really short. When it comes to the actual production, I kind of try to do as little as possible. I think a lot of the way people view art is that its value is derived from the labor that you put into it. So it's like, wow, that painter must have taken him hours to do that. And so they equate that with it's good art sometimes. And so I kind of want to challenge that by almost doing nothing, but it's still being good art.
Who's to say it's good art, right?
That's a whole nother question.
Right.
But if I think it's good, at least, you know,
Yeah,
that's
that's
the
what-
first step.
And in your case, what's the process?
For a lot of my work is based on real life, right? So everything is based on experience, my personal experiences, observing everything around me, my surroundings. That happens on a daily basis, right? Traveling around, driving around, everything I see, that's what influences me. And then from there, I use photography kind of to capture that, and then eventually manipulate that into painting or into using objects or whatever it is.
Do you do drafts, as in several versions until you are content with the work?
I don't. I do notes and then I go right away with it.
I tend to do the same unless...
Yeah,
that-
me too. I'm a first
Yeah.
draft person. As
Unless
in, if
that-
the
I
think
first
that's
draft
always the
doesn't
best
work,
thing.
throw
It's
it away.
like-
Yeah.
Unless it's horrible.
Yeah.
Do you do commissions? Because, you know, if people hear, oh, you're a visual artist, can you do a portrait of, you know, my cat?
Depends how much they're paying.
So you would accept a commission to paint a cat.
If the money is right, why not?
I don't think anybody would ever ask me to paint a picture of anything.
You're not, shall we say, representational.
I mean,
But you could be if you wanted to.
Yeah, maybe. I haven't tried in a long time, but I think I still could.
Here's a difficult question. How good do you think your work is? Because I think the faculty of self-criticism is one that has to be constantly worked on before, you know, it becomes automatic.
I always think at the moment that I make it that it's like the best thing ever. That's why I feel like, okay, it's done. But then maybe give it a few days, I'll be like, oh,
Yeah.
that's not so good. But I mean, I am proud of what I've made, but I think the best thing is the next thing.
Yeah, I agree. I always go back and forth with what I make. I like it one day, the next day I'm like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever made. And then the next day again, I'm like, this is great. But I think at the end of it, if you don't feel it's good, I think you're doing something wrong.
Do you read reviews of your work?
Yeah, I think you should. I think that to not listen to what people are saying is a mistake. But I think to accept all those statements as being valid is also a mistake.
Yeah, I think that's...
So I think you have to pick and choose whose opinion is valuable.
Correct. Yes, as in, I'm not listening to the idiots.
Yeah.
I already have a list of people I will listen to.
I have.
I mean, as much as possible, we don't want to listen to that, but we're human after all, right? Like, things can affect us in a way. So it's just, I guess, finding the right balance of what you want to accept and what you just want to ignore.
Well, actually, I think there are two types of artists. There are artists that make work for themselves. Like it's the act of creation is the point in itself.
Yes.
So I think for those people, whatever they make doesn't matter what people say
Because they're happy with it.
it fulfilled the need.
Fulfilled themselves, yes.
But I think there's also the artist who wants to communicate something to the public. And in that way, you're almost more like a designer than an artist because you have an audience in mind. And so if your audience doesn't get what you're trying to say, then I think you have to think about what am I doing and why is it not getting through?
It's a good point at a time when everyone wants to be famous. Okay.
Yeah.
But what do you think?
Especially for someone who's relying on art as it's my living, right?
Yeah.
It's finding that balance of how much I want to give up of my own integrity, I guess, and how much you're willing to go for someone to buy your work. There's always that struggle between the two. For me, that's the struggle, finding that balance, that right balance, where I still feel at the end of it, I'm satisfied with what I made, and I'm not giving into whatever the market wants or whatever a collector wants or whatever someone else wants. End of the day, it should be what you want.
And which artists have influenced your work
There's so many. Like right now,
right now?
like Saul Lewitt. He's an American conceptual
Lewitt, yes.
artist. I like Felix Gonzalez Torres from Cuban American. And I like his work because it's very like ephemeral. It's like there's so much poetry in the simplicity of his work.
Yeah, for me, there's so many, and it depends, like you said, what stage in life you're at. One that I can think of right now is Kerry James Marshall, who's an African-American painter. Very figurative. My works are not figurative at all, and yet there's something about his stuff that kind of draws me, because it's, I guess, the complete opposite of my work. And it's also very political, very current, I guess, in the times. But I think overall, though, like, without a doubt, Marcel Duchamp is one of those that has influenced all of us.
Yeah.
Especially
Yeah.
his use of the ready-made objects. That's something I use up to now. So
Yeah, same here. Yeah.
I mean, that's one of those, the most influential maybe.
Yeah, so as professional artists, you work with galleries. And
Yeah.
of course, galleries have specific requirements, as in they have to sell the stuff. So could you tell us some gallery horror stories?
I have horror stories from when I was on the gallery end.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean like those
Spill,
were,
yes.
So when I used to live in London, I worked for a logistics company. And so we were shipping art all over the world, all the time. And so we worked with a lot of the big museums and stuff. So we sent really massive work sometimes. And I remember there was one day.
Did you ever break anything?
Oh yeah, this is where I'm going. We're going there.
Okay.
Hold on.
I didn't personally break it. I mean, like I worked in the office, so I was handling like more project management stuff. But I remember one of my colleagues just sent me an email that was just sent to them. And all it was a photograph, stone sculpture on the wall. And then all we received was like a picture of it on the floor, smashed to pieces, like it had just fell. That happens all the time, like it happens like art, people don't realize is art is a physical industry. It's like we are dealing with stuff.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
breakage that we
Yeah.
don't see.
Yeah, definitely.
Mishandling.
If people can lose a Richard Serra work, which is the size of a building, as in what else can they?
Yeah, and then like we alluded to earlier, theft. Like I remember nothing happened to us when I was working, but I remember reading a lot of stories of like sculptures being stolen in transit, but then being sold for scrap metal because they didn't realize. Like,
It was an art.
yeah.
Right.
It was like, what is this crap? And then they just sold it to like the junkyard.
What do you want to do next? As in, do you have like a huge project you've been thinking about that, you're preparing to, you're kind of in a holding period until the next exhibit?
No, you got a lot of stuff. He's busy.
Yeah, I've got some stuff going, but I guess in long term, like I said earlier, I wanted to rediscover my Belgian roots. So whether that's living there or going as having a residency there, something, so that I can regain that connection, I guess. Because I feel like now at this point, I've been here for 13 years. I'm not Filipino fully, but I feel like I've already regained some of those roots.
What was the weirdest thing that you encountered in the Philippines when you first moved here? It's like, this is a strange country.
For instance, something with language.
Did anyone ask you baba baba or something?
No, it's a story with balut.
Okay.
Okay,
Those are always good stories.
those are always good stories.
I don't understand why, people who didn't grow up here are freaked out by balut.
I don't get it
It's
either.
an egg.
I didn't grow up here, but I like balut. That's my Filipino
okay.
side, I guess.
Good.
I don't know.
With
But
mayo though.
I think it would work with mayo. Yeah.
Good work, but no, I haven't tried it with mayo. So there was once, all of a sudden, I had a craving for balut. So I went to a place that usually sells balut, which is usually on the side or something, right, a side street or whatever. But it was a store or like a stall. So I went inside and asked for balut, and the vendor gave me a piece of paper.
Balot.
Exactly.
Okay.
So
a
I didn't know.
linguistic problem.
I
yes.
didn't know what, and so yeah, she gave me a paper. And I'm like, I don't know what to do with the paper, and so she just said, balut. Of course, I said, yeah, balut. Gave me the paper, and then eventually I figured out, okay, she wanted me to write my number. And
Oh
of
my
course,
This is
My-
going in such a good direction.
No, but
Okay.
my
This
Belgian
is the
side,
answer to
my
the
Belgian,
previous question.
my
Yes.
Belgian side, no, not that in decent proposal yet, but
It's
my
cheaper than you thought.
It's
my-
just a pilot. Okay.
yeah, my Belgian side, my first world thinking is, okay, she must need my number for health reasons, or if in case something happens when I consume this balut, that it's something like that.
So
okay.
there's no anaphylactic shock.
Exactly.
Yes.
So for security reasons, I gave my number. Later on, I never got my balut. So I went home disappointed, and I'm like, what the hell was that? Turns out it was palod instead of balut.
Oh, so you bought cell phone.
I got
time.
cell phone time instead of the aborted fetus.
Ah, okay. Palod. Well,
Palod,
that is...
balut, whatever. That was one of the strangest things. Yeah.
And when you moved to Manila, anything of that sort?
Yeah, I'm trying to think, but like I've just internalized everything, and, or maybe I blocked it from
We
my
blocked it from our
memory
memories.
as a survival mechanism.
Well, a lot of people are buying art, as in, many of them don't know anything about art. It's just that art is the new it bag, you know, how people used to buy, you know, MS bags, whatever. But now
Yeah.
they're like, in order to be, you know, seen as rich, I need to own some art.
Cultured.
Yes. So, suppose someone who knows nothing about art wants to buy art. Do you have any, you know, advice? Like, what should they go for?
I think for me, go for something you like.
As
Something
in,
not-
your personal preferences, make it a valid choice.
Yeah, not based on so and so said this person is hot right now or whatever. Whatever artwork makes you feel a certain way, and if you like that, just get it. Regardless of who the artist is, known, unknown, it's how it makes you feel. That's it.
I would say take some time to educate yourself about art, and at the end of the day you have to be informed about your own taste and stuff, but I think there's something to be said about working to develop that taste, because you know, like what we thought was good when we were kids is not necessarily what we thought is good now. Yeah, start where you're comfortable, but challenge yourself, you know, because a lot of good art right now is challenging. It's not something you would look at right away and be like, you know, like what we were
You would
alluding
look
to
at it
earlier.
and say, art ba yan?
Yeah, so I think that if you kind of challenge yourself to understand why it's there and what it's doing, that maybe you'll evolve your own kind of perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, so I forgot to ask, as in the main question I have to ask all guests, how do you maintain your sanity in a bonkers world where, you know, there's so much aggravation and misery out there? So how do you deal, besides drinking?
Besides, but that's the only way. Drown your sorrows.
That's why we are where we are and not where we could be.
Exactly.
I like
Yeah,
that.
you go first.
I exercise, man. Like
You run or?
I do like, you know, like boxing, jiu-jitsu, and then I just need to get that physical
the-
exertion.
The aggression out,
Yeah.
and you travel.
I travel, yeah, and well, with alcohol aside, I think I like to eat. So I like to try new things. Balut aside, I like to eat all kinds of things. And
Yeah, wait till you find out the different variations in the egg snack category, like kwek kwek
Yeah,
and things like that.
I came from UP, I know this stuff.
Okay, good. Yes. So you have been exposed to the
I've been
basic
exposed.
germs. Yes.
Basic germs, yes.
Yes.
We're
So-
still here.
We're
yeah.
still alive, yeah.
And you're alive.
Barely,
and
but
making art.
we're here.
So, thanks very much for coming.
Thank you
for
very much.
having us.
Yeah.
Yes.